Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show on News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. Hope you're having a fantastic day. We go to the phones. Our next guest this morning, our good friend Scott Braddock, editor, quorumreport.com. Scott, what is going on today?
Lots going on. Where would you like to start? We can go anywhere from China to Ukraine to Washington to Austin. The news is all over the place.
It really is. I guess why not? Just for fun. Let's start with China. I do congratulate the NBA because they have brought the left and the right together in condemning the NBA.
I love it, and there are the same kind of undertones we heard last week. What was it? President Trump had tweeted out congratulations to the communist government for their existence for 70 years.
Yeah.
And you had Republican state lawmakers saying things like, the president says, congrats on, all of your success, or whatever he said, and something like that. And you had conservatives say, I think the president misspelled 70 years of brutal communist regime.
Yeah, that was a little... That was a cringeworthy tweet. That was cringeworthy.
Not good. And as Senator Cruz has often said, what he hears from Texans is, a lot of Texans, is they like the results with Trump, but they wish they could just maybe change the password on his Twitter so that he wouldn't say some of this stuff. NBA really caught between a rock and a hard place here. I mean, think about the fact that the NBA has been probably... I'm not using it in the political sense, but sort of the most liberal in terms of their policy about what their athletes are allowed to say.
Oh,
and
sure.
Really not have. I mean, it's not like the NFL where there's immediate backlash and the guy's career is over because he did something that a lot of folks don't like. The NBA players are out there saying pretty much anything they want to say.
Yeah, it's a very social justice friendly league.
Yeah, and look, they know who their audience is. But they also know who another one of their big audiences is, and that's the Chinese people. And the Chinese government, of course, wants to have it. This is my simple redneck version of this, but it's they want to have it both ways, right? They want to have communism, but they want to engage in capitalism too,
right, in
China, right? And so billions of dollars are at stake when the GM of the Houston Rockets goes out and says, look, I support the pro-democracy protests going on in Hong Kong. The Chinese government doesn't like this, and the Houston Rockets in particular have been the team, from right here in Texas, the team that has done the most to promote the NBA in China. With Yao being one of the big stars, and getting people really excited about the NBA. And as I was looking at the reports this morning, I didn't realize China is the only other country where the NBA is incorporated as a business. They have NBA China. And so, they've got all this money at stake. The owner of the Rockets, Tillman Fertitta, the billionaire buyer, he had said, look, he gave a talking to, I guess, to his GM, but they're standing by him. They're not going to do anything like fire him, nothing that extreme. But he did have to apologize, or he was, I guess, asked to apologize and take down the original tweet. So maybe not so much with the free speech stuff when you're talking China.
The people in China, they would not have been able to see that tweet anyway. So
you're right.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating. And
now, wasn't there an agreement between China and the Houston Rockets, and that got torn up with all of this?
Looks like maybe, yeah. And
some type of relationship there.
Yeah, so we'll see if they can repair that and where we go from here. But that's what happens when you're dealing with what is for all intents and purposes an actual communist regime. Yeah,
exactly. And
fascinating. That free speech stuff is for the birds.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it was just it was I think it was Senator Cornyn who retweeted and said, I agree with you, to Julian Castro. And it was, it was just one of these where, you've got politicians on both sides of the aisle that are coming together on this and telling the NBA, you guys are all about social justice, and that's great. That's wonderful. That's what you want to be about. But are you really, if you're embracing the Chinese government, which if you want to talk about oppression, there you go. There's some oppression that's happening over there.
Right. Castro had said China is using its economic power to silence critics, even those in the United States. The United States must lead with our values and speak out for pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong and not allow American citizens to be bullied by an authoritarian government. And there's Senator Cornyn saying, Julian, glad to agree with you on this one.
Wow, very interesting. Let's kind of move into more of the. I mean, that does have to deal with the political realm. But
I love when the sports folks dabble in politics.
It is nice, isn't it?
All of a sudden, anybody cares what I do for a living. Thank you.
Well, it's that, and it's fine when it's the NBA because we really don't care about the NBA. When it's football, we're like, whoa, hey,
yes,
back off. Back off, guys. When it's the NBA, it's like, oh, well, that's the NBA for you. What are you going to do? President Trump is going to hold, speaking of the NBA, a big rally at the American Airlines Center in Dallas coming up on, October 17th?
Yeah, just here in a couple of weeks, the president will be there at the AAC. I saw right before that he's also going to do a rally in Lake Charles, Louisiana, if you want to make a road trip to the casino.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, let's go. We can smoke cigars there on the floor, unlike in New Orleans where it's banned at Harris. But look, the president coming to Dallas, he is, I believe, making his 12th or 13th trip to Texas as president, which is a lot. That's more than, you check me on this, that's more than any president who's a Republican who did not live here in Texas, in recent memory. I mean, he's putting a big focus on Texas. People, of course, ask whether or not that means that Texas is in play. I would say that the Trump campaign certainly seems to think that it might be. Texas is in their list of 17 key states. They avoid using the word swing state, of course. But I think they do have some concerns, and I think it'll be interesting to see who shows up for this. Remember when President Trump had the rally in Houston last year at the behest of Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, not at the behest of Senator Ted Cruz, who of course did show up, but he was the one, really, working hard in an election that they thought he might lose against Beto O'Rourke. Patrick brings him to Houston, and there was some concern among local Republicans about whether they should be there. So, you had former Congressman now, John Culberson, who's a Republican who had been there for I think 8 terms. I'd have to check that, but anyway, he wasn't there, and he ended up losing his race to a Democrat. When he was asked why he wouldn't be there, his office said there was a long-planned meeting about flood control in his district, and he was going to be talking to constituents about that instead of being at the rally with the president. Texas House members from DFW might want to, who are Republicans, might instead want to go to the Republican retreat in Austin that weekend. They had been planning on that anyway. They've got their big retreat that they do with the House GOP caucus on the 17th and 18th in Austin. And, the president, maybe not the most popular guy in some of their districts right now. These are the districts we've talked a lot about, Chad, that may be in play, and might actually end up being part of what puts Democrats in charge in the Texas House in the next legislative session. In those districts in Collin County, Denton County, and right there in Dallas County, you can imagine that they might not be the Republicans who want to be seen as buddying up to President Trump. Meantime, I would expect statewide Republicans to certainly be there. Lieutenant Governor Patrick, of course, has had his problems with the Republican base lately on the gun control issue. I'm sure he'll be there rallying the troops. He may even be sort of emceeing the whole thing. We'll see.
Yeah.
I would expect John Cornyn to be there, and I don't know about Governor Abbott. We'll see. Whether he wants to be seen as being right there with President Trump, or whether he has some other plans that day. For some of these Republicans, Chad, who might not necessarily want to be, in the frame with President Trump when he visits Texas, I'm reminded, you go all the way back to 2010. Remember when Bill White was the Democratic nominee against Governor Perry in the governor's race? President Obama would come to Texas, and the Democrat, White, would just be somewhere else. He didn't want to be seen with
scheduling conflict.
President Obama. Yeah. Something else going on, something that had been pre-planned, at least at the sort of congressional and state house and local level. That's kind of come full circle now with a very polarizing president in office and President Trump, and some of these Republicans not necessarily wanting to be seen with him. So it'll be interesting to see who shows up.
Yeah. Speaking of the presidential race, it's been kind of quiet for Julian Castro and for Beto O'Rourke. The press kind of hounding at least O'Rourke to release his fundraising numbers, and he told at least one reporter last week, "I just don't feel like releasing them."
Don't feel like releasing them. You may have seen, and we probably talked about the fact that O'Rourke was sort of making fun of the fundraising appeals that some of these candidates are making, where they just sound desperate. And I don't know if you're on a lot of these lists like I am, Chad. I end up getting everybody's fundraising emails, Republicans and Democrats. And at some point, Beto does have a pretty funny line when he says, I could do a Facebook Live where I've got a kitten and sort of act like something bad might happen to the kitten if you don't send me $5. But if you do, Miss Fluffy will be okay. That sort of, he was making fun of just how silly these appeals are. But it is coming down to the point of, do or die time, I think, for both Castro and O'Rourke. O'Rourke not saying what his numbers are is pretty telling, especially when some other candidates who, at least at some point, had been sort of in the same tier with O'Rourke, like Pete Buttigieg, for example, had, I think, a $19 million haul. Andrew Yang had $10 million, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
And, these candidates, they don't drop out of the race for almost any other reason other than running out of money. Having resources is what you really have to have. O'Rourke's comments up until this point, some of the comments from the campaign last week made it sound like, hey, we're basically good through February, maybe through the Iowa caucuses, but after that we might be in some trouble. So they're not just outright saying, like Cory Booker did recently, where he said, if I don't raise a certain amount, then I'm out. But, Chad, they're almost saying that with some of these comments.
By the way, what do you make of Joe Biden only raising, $15 million? He didn't have a big fundraising haul.
Doesn't have a big fundraising haul. It's such a big field, and of course we saw where President Trump and the RNC last week announced that they had raised, about $125 million, something like that in the last reporting period. That's a huge amount, but of course that's that's what you have when the race is settled on the Republican side. I mean, President Trump's going to be the nominee, obviously. It's the advantage of incumbency. On the Democratic side, it's so spread out. I think the Democratic voters no matter what the polls show exactly right now, they still don't have any idea which way they're going to go. I think this first big fight with President Trump on the Ukraine scandal has exposed some of the weakness of Biden, if there wasn't already some exposed from some of his, at least that very first debate performance with Biden. But, look, the president has shown that, and I think this is a pretty accurate statement, no matter what the facts are, he has shown the ability to fight back and, make the other person the issue. That you have the president accused of trying to get a political favor from a foreign leader, to go after one of his political rivals. Biden says that this is because I'm going to beat him like a drum. That's the quote. But then he doesn't go on to beat him like a drum. The Trump campaign puts out an ad that basically says, look, I wanted them to look into corruption of this guy, and why aren't they doing that, and why isn't that the scandal? So, I think that they have softened Biden up a little bit. It doesn't mean that he's not still the front runner, but he's got a long way to go.
Very nice. Scott, tell folks what they can find today and all week long at Quorum Report.
We're actually tracking a couple of special elections, a few of them that are happening because of some folks who have dropped out of the legislature, are going to be retiring. There are some special elections, and these things do matter as far as what happens with the overall partisan makeup of the Texas House next year, which we've been talking about a lot. The next legislative session could see the Democrats in charge, and some of these special elections coming up may give us some clues about that. So we've got some of their finance reports that are coming out this week. We'll check on that for you. And you can always check out what's going on with your state government and get our free email alerts there at quorumreport.com.
No movie reviews, though.
I avoid it. I think, like I told you in an email, I can't do a movie review without giving away everything about the. My main observation about whatever movie would give away the entire plot. I don't know how those guys do that.
Yeah, I know. I've been getting.
They don't say what happened.
I've been getting text messages from folks who are like, "Well, are you gonna tell us about the Joker movie? Are you gonna what are your thoughts?" And I will, but you're right. It's one of those
Give
where
people a week or something.
I'm just gonna blow it. I'm just gonna be like, "Here's what happens."
You could, to be fair, you could just say, "Look, next week at this time, I'm going to give you all my thoughts about it, and if you don't want to hear it, just turn the radio off."
Yeah. No, we never do that.
Really.
Yeah, we never do that. No.
Well, they're not really going to do
it. Scott, thank you very much. Have a good week. We'll visit with you next week, my friend.
Thanks, my friend. Talk soon.
That's Scott Braddock, editor, Quorum Report.